I think there are a lot of things you can talk about when it comes to His Holiness. You know, he was an educator, he was an author, he was an evangelist, but to me, most of all, he was a father. You know, anyone who had any kind of interaction with him, whether it was just like taking a blessing from him at the Makar, or just being in his presence, or listening to one of his sermons, you know, you immediately felt like one of his children.
Pope Shenouda affected me in many ways. I was a very big fan of Pope Shenouda's poetry, especially Qalbi al-Khafaq and Anta Lam Tunsit. I remember in the 4th grade I went to learn Qalbi al-Khafaq on the piano, and till this day I keep playing it in remembrance of him. His quotes and sayings were very, very, very deep, and I always used to read them whenever I was upset. He was an amazing shepherd, one who cared about his church and about his people more than about himself. May God repose his soul in the paradise of joy.
The one thing that will always resonate in my memory is Sayyidina's laughter. He would share jokes and stories and would always laugh and smile, filling the room with his love. The youth were very important to him. He would sit with us even after long days of meetings and errands up until 2 o'clock in the morning, never turning us away.
We know that he has a very, very large sense of humor, and I wouldn't have enough time to sit down and share half the things that he would say when he would visit us in the Makar. But one thing I do remember is that there was a child that he would play with, and he would tell the child, "Inta walad حلو," and then the child would tell him, "La inta walad حلو." So that's one thing that I remember about him, is that he loved children, and his sense of humor was enormous and captivating. So now we have Saint Pope Shenouda to intercede on our behalf.
His laugh, his smile was always contagious. He always made the people around him laugh, and he even loved that. He said, you know, one of his jokes is like he couldn't stop laughing when he wanted to stop something. When he became monk, he couldn't stop laughing, and that even in the worst times or the hardest times, he'd always say a joke to lighten the mood. He said, "Don't let the problem or the situation take over you."
My one main memory of His Holiness goes back to an encounter I had with him during one of his visits in the late 1980s at St. Mary's in Brunswick. As usual, he had quite a number of bishops that accompanied him, and on this occasion, one of those bishops was His Grace Ambassadors from the Port Said, Port Fouad area. Ambassadors knew my grandparents quite well because of some work that my grandfather did in the Port Said, Port Fouad area, namely building a couple of churches in the area. My mother and I had spoken with Ambassadors earlier that day, and Ambassadors said he wanted to arrange for His Holiness to come meet us. So while we were at church that day, while His Holiness was there, and I guess towards the end of the day, we were standing in the back of the church, and His Holiness was walking out with everybody, and Ambassador stopped him, whispered something in his ear, and His Holiness got that, you know, very sincere signature smile of his, and he ended up waving my mother and I over. Told my mother that he was very appreciative of the work that my grandfather did. He thought very highly of him, and then he proceeded to give us a blessing. And I think it's definitely by far one of those memories that I hope will last for the rest of my life, if not longer. And well, you know, it's been repeated plenty of times. I think it can't be said enough that we're definitely going to miss His Holiness. At the same time, we're very appreciative of the fact that we're going to have somebody continuously praying for us and interceding on our behalf.
We are very lucky here in New Jersey in the East Coast to have seen the Pope many times, and some of those experiences or memories will last with me forever. Whether it's Tizbaha all night and then a very small intimate group sitting with the Pope, or whether it's an 8-hour drive out to Ohio to see the Pope even for a brief moment. That's what His Holiness did. He gathered us all together, and he built memories and fellowship for us and for all our friends and the youth in the area to get together. We would drop whatever we're doing just to go see His Holiness, and that's something that will stick with me forever.
Just to share one story, we went to Egypt once, and His Holiness we were blessed to be able to sit with him for a little while in the Abbaseya. And beverages came out, and I went to go open his can of soda for him. And when I opened the can of soda for him, he did this. And it was really funny. And he asked me how old I was, and I told him, I think I was in college. I told him I was 21. And he laughed, and he goes, I'm 60 years older than you. And we all laughed. And it's something like, it's a non-story. It's like really, nothing happened. But it was just really, for me, really sweet, and really, like, I felt very special, and I felt instantly like his child. And I still feel special because of that. And I know a lot of people have stories with His Holiness like that. And I think that's because he loved us so much. And that's why we love him so much, because he loved us so much.
What I loved about His Holiness was that he was a man that probably never regretted any word that he said. If you notice during question and answer or a conversation, that he would take about 10 seconds in silence before he would answer, whereas we would jump to answer right away. This really showed his wisdom, and that he would pray right before he would answer a question. And it showed that he really abided by the words that Christ said, that we would have to give an account for every idle word that we would speak.
He was always very wise, but very simple. He had like the innocence of a child, and I think that like irradiated in the room, and it was just so, that's what drew me to him the most, I think. He always reminded me of the verse that said, whoever takes the lowly position of a child, or of this child, is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It was just my favorite quality about him. I learned so much from him.
Well, the way His Holiness affected me personally was two things. One, it's the way he established all the churches throughout the world, especially in America. Like when I travel, I can go to any place in the country pretty much and attend church. And secondly is the way he ordained youthful priests for us, especially in this area, that have really affected me personally, and have really, without some of the priests in this area, it would be hard to be where I am right now. So I thank His Holiness for that.
The one thing that I truly love about him, and the one thing that I pray I too could gain, is the love that he had for everyone. That someone who was born without parents could look at you and make you feel so loved in this world.
When I was, I think, like 4 years old, he visited the Dallas church, and somehow I found myself like I was sitting at his feet, but he took me on his lap and can be me, and like he made me feel like I was like the most special girl ever, and that till now I remember as if it was yesterday. Like I remember what I was wearing, I remember everything, and even to the point where he came back to Dallas to visit again like a couple years later, and I insisted that I told my parents like I have to go see him because I know he's gonna be so happy to see me, and I thought he would remember me by name. All of this because he took me on his lap and made me feel like I was really like his little daughter, and that was something that I loved about him so much. And because of that memory that I have of him, I'm so confident that he's in heaven, and I know that he is praying for me by name, and like all of us by name. And yeah, he's just a wonderful like Giddu. I love him.
One thing I really liked about His Holiness is that he had this combination of intellect and compassion. And I think if you take a look around, you're going to see that that's a very, very rare combination.
My most memorable time with the Pope was when I met him in 99 or in 2000. No, in 99. And I was a senior in high school. And I asked him if Wei was Siami. And he said yes.
One of the things I admire most about His Holiness was his ability to make jokes and laugh, even in the face of tribulations and hardships and all the stresses that he had to deal with as Pope. He used to say that a day that he didn't laugh, he didn't count as a day that he lived. And I think that's something that I took away from his life. With all my little worries or whatever, I remember how much he had to put up with, and it kind of gives me something to look up to.
He has such a unique way of really making everyone feel very special and very loved, and has like a really great way of just reaching out to every single person in a way where, I don't know, it's very tailored. Like very Christ-like. How Christ really like made a point to just meet every single person and be very personal with them. I don't know, like a couple years ago he came and he visited the Makar, and it was January 26th, and I'll never forget this day because I don't know, I'm so weird, but I definitely think that he was there for me. He was. January 26th at night we were praying Tizbahah with Amir Annis, and we got word that His Holiness had rested and he was ready to meet with us and sit with us downstairs in the quarters. So we had went downstairs and we're waiting for His Holiness to come outside, and around like 11:20, 11:30, time's passing, and then all of a sudden 11:59 we hear Abu David come outside from the doors and he say, "Okay, everyone calm down, everyone quiet down, His Holiness is going to come out, he's going to sit with us." Midnight exactly, His Holiness comes outside and like he sits down, he takes his chair. Midnight on January 27th, my birthday. He came out for me. It was for me. I promise it was for me. Nobody else agrees with me, but I mean, I know it was for me, and so does he. And for sure, I mean, for sure he knows me by name, and I don't know, I'll forever be grateful for everything that he's done for the church and for us as his children. And I ask that he remembers us before God in his prayers, and just continues to love us the same way that he did, that just continue to love us always.
When I was a little 4-year-old kid, my parents wanted to ordain me a deacon. So one day, Bishop was coming to our church in Jersey City. My parents got me into it and they said, "Sam, let's go, you're going to get ordained, you're going to be a deacon, you know, woohoo." But I said no, and I insisted that nobody would ordain me deacon except for the Pope. Now, just to put this in perspective, this is back in 1990, and the Pope had never made a trip to the US and had never come to our area ever. So to wait for the Pope to ordain me a deacon might have taken God knows how long. But I insisted, my parents didn't force me, and then in about 1990 he came, he visited a church in Jersey City, and he ordained me deacon.
We hope that we could be a fraction of the man that he was, and I encourage all the youth to read his books and listen to the sermons that we're blessed to have and hear, and just continue doing the things that he told us to do and follow his advice.
I really want to touch on his innocence, his simplicity, his innocence, and how I just felt like he himself was like one of the children, and how he had the heart of a child. And this is, when I looked at him, I didn't just see a pope or a patriarch. This is what made me feel like he was as if he was my grandfather, my own personal grandfather. Even though I haven't had as many encounters with him as others have, or I haven't had, like a close personal relationship with him. But this is what made me feel like I do have a personal relationship with him. It's his ability to be just as one of the children. It's such a Christ-like quality, and it's something that I strive for, and I hope that one day I can also be like him. And I'm happy now that I have him as an intercessor, and now I actually can have a very close personal relationship with him.
Of course, I learn a lot from the life of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, as do all of us. But one thing in particular that stands out for me is His Holiness's emphasis on defending the true Orthodox faith that Christ gave us through His apostles and the fathers and the blood of the martyrs. His Holiness was always ready to stand up against any heresies. No matter how nuanced or subtle they were, he always had the light of the true faith in his eyes and in his heart and on his lips, ready to be spoken out courageously and boldly. And he even knew the teachings that were in different schools and with different people. And when I decided to study theology, the reason I chose this particular school is because it had his stamp of approval, and for him to know the specific teachings taught at specific schools in America was astounding and very inspirational.
And we pray that God give us the same spirit to study and to understand and to defend the true faith.
So a personal story that affected me about His Holiness Pope Shenouda was in 2007 when I was returning from Africa. I had the blessing of riding on the same plane with him, and I got to sneak up into his first class area and talk to him for a little bit. And I remember I was talking to him about my mission trip to Africa and just the whole campaign of evangelism and mission in the U.S. And His Holiness was like so supportive and so happy when I spoke to him about it. And one thing that resonates in my head was he said that when you're serving, just make sure that your cup is always being filled on a daily basis. And he was encouraging me to just spend time with God on a daily basis in order to pour out to others and be able to witness to them effectively. He was always supportive of youth and always encouraging, and His Holiness was just such a big blessing to us.
Whenever I remember His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, I remember a modern-day church father. His ascetic life, his command of scripture, his knowledge of church history and dogma, it reminds me of one of the giants of old, like Saint Athanasius. Whenever His Holiness would speak or write, he would do so with great wisdom, with authority, and with love. And this love he continually demonstrated to us, through his weekly meetings which he would conduct regardless of his health, and through the innumerable bishops and priests which he ordained for the Church. And as a true servant of God, he labored tirelessly so that the schisms of the Church may be healed. When Pope Paul VI of Rome invited His Holiness to the Vatican, it was the first time since 451 AD that the Alexandrian and the Roman Patriarch met. It was from 451 AD to His Holiness Pope Shenouda III. And I would just like to conclude with the contemplation I remember from Father Antonius Tenius, contemplating on the plan of the Lord for the Church. He said that when the Church was spiritually immature and had a weak faith, the Lord granted us Pope Carlos VI. And then, when we matured, the Lord granted us His Holiness Pope Shenouda III to further nourish our minds and our hearts. And I am confident that the Lord will again grant us the Patriarch that we need the most in the times to come.
His smile, His wisdom, and His encouragement will always be with us. And now we have another saint that can intercede on our behalf. He'll be missed.
We can always learn from His Holiness that he was ready. He was ready to go. And instead of focusing on what miracles he did, or how he lived his life, we should learn from his life to know, like, we have to be ready now. We have to work on ourselves to maybe go meet him, and then we'll have that personal story, that personal relationship with him up in heaven, hopefully.
And so I guess we just want to conclude by saying that we love you, and we can't wait to see you soon.
Yeah. Please pray for us.